All right, how y'all doing today? Gotta get the hair straight. All right, back. Basically, we're moving into poetry. All right, I have here Walt Whitman, selected poems. All right, here's a picture of the guy right here. All right, I've been wanting to read this guy for a very long time, because he's the American bard and stuff. He's for the people, etc., etc. So I wanted to see him. But to be honest with you, a lot of times when you get you see his poems, okay, in the library. A lot of times they'll show his Leaves of Grass, but not the original edition, which is about, I think, in between 150 and 175 pages. They will show Leaves of Grass, his deathbed edition, which is about 700 pages long. Okay, so that can be really daunting. I've tried starting to read it, but of course you give up, And then plus, so I'll go back and forth and stuff because he just kept on adding stuff with each new edition till his death and stuff. But I just wanted something that was like a all-around stuff, thing, and that was more readable. And because this edition, which is basically the American Poets Project, I'm gonna read a couple more of those, and it's by selected by this guy Harold Bloom, University of Chicago, and stuff. And these are in very much sizable chunks. And this is like a all-star collection, and this was like 210 pages. So 210 pages versus 700 pages. Which one are you going to do? Then also doing a little bit more research at the library. He wrote a lot more stuff than just poems and stuff. And a lot of his poems, there's a certain amount of poems that haven't been published. Like about, I think, a year and a half ago, I did Live Oak and Ivy, which is some stuff that was his that was lost, and it was basically where he openly talked about his homosexuality. People have known that his Calamus collection and the Deathbed Leaves of Grass, that's where he talks about his sexuality, but he's a little bit more, sometimes it's mixed, sometimes he'll say it directly, sometimes he'll hint at it and stuff, but in Live Oak and Ivy, he actually said it and stuff. So yeah, and there's tons of other stuff. Like, I did not know that he was a newspaper man. So there's books out there of collection of his newspaper articles. He's also written a lot of essays and stuff. He's written a lot of journals. Like, he had Civil War journals. That's another thing I found out. He was actually a medic in the Civil War. And then he also wrote 2 books that were found also after, just like Live Oak and Ivy was found after his death, 100 years after his death and published. He wrote 2 novels and stuff, and you can go get it. At my library here, you can go get it. One is about a guy who it's called the inebriate, so he was a drunkard, so temperance was big back then, and so he wrote about that. Then the other one, can't really remember right now. I've read the back of it. I believe it's a kind of a Horatio Alger, Pull Yourself by Bootstrap, if I remember it correctly. But yeah, he wrote all types of stuff. He just wasn't a poet. He was all over the place. There are kind of portable readers of him, but they emphasize his poetry instead of having an even mix of his newspaper stuff, his essays, his fiction, his diaries and stuff. They don't really, it's not even and stuff. Whereas other readers for other authors and litter bells and letters of people, they just overwhelmingly just talk about the poetry. But he was more than that, you know what I'm saying, and stuff. And then there's a lot of collection of interviews of him, over the years that's been done, especially like towards the end of his life. There's like something called the Camden interviews, because he was in Camden, New Jersey. So yeah, he's a whole ball of wax that I really want to try to get to, but there's no reader out there that I think that'll really cover it all. But so I'm just going to concentrate on poetry. And as you can see, his poetry is very dense and very symbolic. That's why I have this Green Haven Press Literary Companion to American Authors. I'm going to be using this because this really helped me with the poems and stuff, because if you're not really familiar, his stuff is so dense you need an interpreter. So that's the reason why I got that. I could have just read and gave you my raw opinion, but this thing really helped me, so I'm going to go a little bit into this too. So I'll be referring back to this and stuff because especially he very much went all over the place. You know what I'm saying? He saw himself as the American bard, so he commented on everything, and he was very vociferous and voluminous and verbose. He was very, you know, tautologic. I know it's a weird word. Basically, tautologic is where you just list out synonyms of the same thing over and over and over again, or you go further in depth into something. And I'll go a little bit more into that. That's kind of tiring. So you have to, not only are you trying to interpret all of his metaphors and stuff, but then you're getting through a lot of stuff that just seems to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the same thing, or is very much, and then he'll repeat that style and stuff with something else. So you get to it, you know. I'm gonna go into the themes. I'm gonna go into a few poems and stuff. My interpretation, what I got, helping from the interpretation of other people, because these Green Haven, these are actually a collection of essays from people over the years. Like, I think we saw stuff from 1890 up in here all the way up to the present, where people were who interpreted his stuff. So this is like let me show you. All right, as you can see, it gets broken down into man and the poet, themes, which really helped me, analysis of individual poems, influence over other poets, blah blah blah. And as you can see, you have different, like Langston Hughes talks about his influence, R.W. French and stuff, and a whole bunch of other people I didn't really know and stuff, but a lot of different people. R.W.B. Lewis, a famous interpreter of American literature, he's up in here. So a lot of people. So this really helped me, because, you know, one person, when you get a whole bunch of different interpretations and stuff, it gives you different angles and stuff, which really breaks down and makes his stuff really lucid. I think I'm gonna use that a lot. I've been using that. I believe this is Harold Bloom. Just like his, oh no, this is somebody else. But yeah, Harold Bloom, he also does a lot of books like this. He'll compile a lot of interpretations of people, of a writer and stuff. So I've read his stuff, and that really helps me with other stuff. But I could just go into this by itself. But I just use it and just let you know what I use to help me interpret. Because, like I said, if you don't have some help, you might miss some stuff. And I did miss some stuff, and literally certain literary interpreters talked about stuff that I found confusing, that I looked at, tried to figure out what the hell he was saying, and didn't. So okay, well, we just get up into it. Let's go with some of his themes. He had a lot of themes, and then also, like I said earlier, he has a lot of lists and stuff. I know we have like a lot of listicles and listology nowadays, but he really listed out stuff. That's why I said where he would go deeper into stuff, that's what he did. And whatnot. And you know what? I got my own interpretation and stuff, but let me just go here, because I just, like up in here in this book, we go to Whitman's Themes and Images by Martin S. Day. All right. And he listed them out, so I'm just going to list them out too, because I agree with a lot of the themes, because you would just repeat these themes over and over and over again, and it took me a little while, but he kind of lists it out here. Like he talks about like One Great America, right? he was really into like unifying America and being like we're one great nation. Democracy, he uses that a lot, you know, because that's participatory. You know, a lot of people can participate in it. It's just not the elites, you know. Individualism, of course, that's American theme. That's, you know, of course, you know, you're going to talk about that. That's like that's our thing. Individualism here in America. Brotherhood, once again, trying to link people together. Industry and labor. Yes, he talks a lot about the jobs, especially not only in the industrialization that was happening during the 1800s when he lived, but also like farm industry, clearing of the land and stuff like that. You know, and then talks about the labor, the individual workers. He goes a lot into the individual. He really likes the common man worker. He talks about him or not. He holds him up and stuff. He doesn't really talk about the management or the ownership and stuff. He talks about the actual guy on the ground. Sex, yes. You can see from this, you know, it's been talked about his homosexuality. But also sometimes when he's talking about sex, sometimes you think he's talking about a woman, sometimes you think he's talking about a man, sometimes it's ambiguous and stuff. But that's a whole nother thing we'll get into. And I'm just listing out here because this organized stuff. Okay, he talks about mysticism. Yes, his type of mysticism, he was part of the group called the he wasn't really a formal part, but he knew him, like the Transcendentalists. Like he had wrote letters back and forth with Emerson and stuff. And they basically pretty much went to India with Hinduism and Buddhism and stuff. And those religions are what we would call monism. Here in the West, we will refer to it as pantheology. Basically, it's where God and all the objects and all us humans and all the other beings and stuff are made of the same material. That's what monism / pantheology is. And they get that from Hinduism / Buddhism and stuff. Emerson, Walden, and all the others and stuff, they got interpretations of like the holy, you know, Hinduism and Buddhist writings and stuff. They were like the first ones to bring that over. A lot of people think that stuff came over in the 60s, 1960s with the hippies and stuff. No, it was old. You had the Transcendentalists, they were the first ones and stuff to kind of go pan religion and stuff and get interpretations of holy texts from around the world and read it, and they glommed onto the Indian religions of Hinduism and Buddhism. Later on, you would have the Theosophical Society, like 50, 60 years later in the 1890s with Madame Blavatsky. They did the same thing. They kind of revived it, but by the time they did it, it was old. And like I said, about 70 years later in the 60s, they did it, and blah, blah, blah. So it was nothing new. So they were the first ones. And that's what he kind of brings and stuff. And he mixes that in with the American labor and also the nature and environment of America and stuff. I'll get a little bit up into it, but that was just to break it down. But let me keep going because this is a long list. He has a lot of metaphors and he goes really deep into it. Song of Myself is kind of, I would say, he kind of repeats that title in different poems. That's pretty much individualism, but his own individualism. That's him talking about his, but then he connects up with other people with their individualism. So that's just individualism, but like him at the center connecting up with everyone else and stuff. Well, pantheism, that's what I said with his mysticism. I've already explained that. Like I said, it's called pantheism. So yeah. Here, something called soul becoming. Basically, birth. You know, you kind of receive your identity at birth. Once you're in existence, you get your identity. Can't really go too much into that because that's pretty much into the pantheism, mysticism type of thing. Okay, images. He has a lot of images, and he kind of goes, you know, he does a lot of See, he kind of mixes, but then doesn't. He'll use nature imagery, but then also imagery of the city and stuff. And sometimes he'll connect the two very tenuously and stuff. But they shadow and reflect each other and stuff. Like he uses like, you know, water. Basically that's just like life, you know, cleansing, also part of life. Because, like, you know, you need water to nourish yourself, so that kind of what he does. It's kind of like purification and nourishment and stuff, from my recollection. Trees, you know, here he says phallic images, but to me, trees, I really don't see him as too much phallic. In his live oak and moss, when he just talked about his homosexuality, it is kind of a phallic symbol, but I really see it as also in there. With live oak and moss, he uses as a thing of individualism and kind of like a personal thing, him standing alone in his homosexuality because he couldn't be out then. So I see it as individualism and standing on your own, basically being a grown-ass man. So that's how I interpret it. He sees it as a phallic symbol. I kind of saw that, but I see his main thing with trees and his most stuff outside of live oak and moss as independence, rugged individualism. You know, birds. Like here, this guy emphasizes, you know, the romantic thing of birds flying and stuff and traveling. But to me, you know, he talks about he kind of goes up into a lot of different stuff. But but for me, I saw the birds as transcendence. Basically, that goes to the transcendentalism and his mysticism. It's just a mystical thing where where you just go outside, you rise above yourself, you improve, you go outside the everyday, experience God, whatever, and then you come back down to earth. That's another thing. It's not a permanent thing of you transcending. It's a thing temporary because birds, they can't fly forever. They have to come back down and like rest on a tree or a mountain and stuff. So that's how I see it as basically mystical experiences, you know, like when you meditate or something, or you go out into the woods and walk around and, you know, and you have a mystical experience. So it's basically a mystical experience, transcendence, you know. That's his own thing. That's how I feel he uses it and stuff. I can't really agree with the way he said it. The city, man, that is so people, how can I say, people emphasize his nature stuff, but he does really go into the city. It's basically, you could see, it's basically kind of like brotherhood, fraternity and stuff. That's where people congregate and stuff, you know, and get stuff done, and they talk and da-da-da. So it's kind of like people coming together. But then also he talks about the factories and stuff. So also it is a symbol of like technology and stuff, and how technology is also transcendent, kind of like the bird, but the bird is like a natural transcendence, whereas technology is an artificial transcendence where by us humans improving technology, we transcend and become better, and it happens inside the city, and it happens by us humans congregating, coming from wherever into the city, and as brotherhoods together in unity, working on technology, improving it, and therefore us becoming better and us transcending as a whole, kind of like the rising sea lifts all boats, but we do it together, you know, in concentrated unity and stuff. So that's kind of what the city emphasizes, by people coming together and then concentrating their resources and improvement of things in technology and stuff. He talks about comradeship also by different people coming from not only the countryside, but then also he talks a little bit about immigration, because he was a New Yorker. A lot of people forget about that. You know, he's from Long Island, and then he went into New York. He also when he got older, went to New Jersey, across the way. But New York was an international city, so not only did people from the local countryside or the nation countryside, but people from all over the world came there. So that's where the world center came together and produced. Also that was like our collective industrialization, improving the country, becoming better, and becoming a superpower and stuff. Also, cities, even though here in America, most of our cities our universities, where we do intellectual stuff and where a lot of the testing is in the countryside and small towns, a lot of universities are in cities also. So I see that too. He kind of missed that. He does talk about education a little bit, but he kind of goes with the flow of what's happening then in the mid 1800s. Celestial objects, yes, he talks a lot about the sun, and how the sun in its light illuminates things and brings knowledge and stuff, and also brings life and stuff. But then he also talks about the stars, excuse me, because there's some stuff up in here that I did agree with. Also, he talks, he uses a lot of clouds too. A lot of clouds. He used clouds as a metaphor. Clouds, they can cause confusion because the sky will get cloudy and block out the sun, and that'll be ignorance. But then when they clear away, and it's like kind of a person clearing out their mind, and once the sun shines through and illuminates things, everything is clear. So that's kind of like, clouds are like kind of an obstacle and stuff. But then also he'll talk about clouds being the shapes of technology and stuff. So clouds can be a hindrance, but then you can use it as an imagination, kind of like a Rorschach test. You know what I'm saying? So clouds are they're like good and bad at the same time and stuff. He talks a little bit about stars at night and stuff, but not a lot. He talks more about the sun and its illuminating process, but he does talk about how the stars at night, because like the North Star, right? A lot of people use the North Star to guide them. Like the slaves used it for freedom, and a lot of people in ancient times, in the shipping days, they would use stars to navigate on the ocean, or sometimes in the desert and stuff, or if they were just lost. So he kind of talks about how stars at night can be used to navigate things and stuff. So yeah. And there's a lot of different stuff here. But that's pretty much the bulk of it and stuff. That's why I use that, because there was so many different symbols and so many different themes. Also he talks about his lists and stuff, but I'll get into that a little bit later. One thing I do want to add, there's a book I wanted to read. It was called Whitman in Light of Vedanta and stuff, and basically it talks about how like I said, the Hinduism and Buddhism, and Vedanta is basically Hinduism, but it's like the philosophical, intellectual side of Hinduism. And basically it really goes into the monistic pantheology, how everything's made of the same material thing. And that book kind of illuminates on his poetry, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, I just wanted to put that up out there because this really helped me and kind of organize all the stuff, because he goes all over the place, and sometimes the stuff can be really cryptic, but this really, I would go into like all the stuff, because I didn't read all of the essays in there, but I read like 80% of them, and it really illuminated stuff like, I'm probably going to be going back and forth with this, not only to help me with the themes and him, individual poems like Song of Myself, that really helped me. Talked about his form and structure, basically the lists and stuff, and basically his lists are like catalogs of people, Calamus, other things, but then also how can I say? Like this section right here, influence of other poets, valuable, like Langston Hughes, this first one, he talks about how, you know, how he was for all Americans regardless of race and class. I kind of doubt that because he, you know, reading some of his stuff, he has said some racist stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I think he's kind of ignoring stuff. He is not for the class structure. You know, he sees that, you know, even though we talk about it's really easy to like class mobility, but he kind of talks how it's not really there. This next guy, Lewis Simpson, honoring Walt Whitman, you know, he talks about, you know, his greatness, but then, you know, Lewis Putman Turco, Whitman is overrated. I kind of have to take a little time out and say that I agree. He's held up as this bard and so great person, but then when you read his stuff, it's really, there's other poets and American poets and poets of that time that I feel are just as good or better. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's because back then they didn't have like, you know, universities where you can go get a degree in literature. The universities back then was different. He didn't go to. Back then you had to basically, one place that you can go, which he did, was to work at a newspaper. That's where a lot of writers back then, into the 1900s and today, that's where they learn the craft, because that's the only place. Now it's kind of different. You have a lot of, you know, workshops and stuff outside of universities, and you have a lot of people forming workshops individually where they can workshop their stuff and come and read their stuff or let people, and they can criticize and so maybe that's the reason why his stuff is not so great. But even though, like I said, you know, even before he came out with Leaves of Grass in 1855, he was about 36. Like I said, he was writing for a newspaper. He wrote 2 novels that we found. He was writing essays and stuff. And the novels he wrote, he actually wrote them before, because like one of them was written in the 1840s, and published in the 1840s, and the other one was published in the early 1850s, right before, like 1852, because Leaves of Grass came out 1855. So that's how you did it. You just wrote. You know what I'm saying? You didn't have a formal instruction now, so maybe that had something to do with it, or maybe he just wasn't really that great. You know what I'm saying? So I have to say, you know, he's a decent poet, but I can't say he's the best. You know, because I've read a lot of poems, not only American poems, but also poems interpreted from other cultures, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, and you know, I was into spoken word when I was younger. I can't really say that he was really all that good, but you know, I can say he was decent as far as the quality. So I just wanted to say that. That's just me. Okay, let me get to my interpretation of things. Okay, as usual, boom, I got it written down because I'm old and stuff. But like his, you know, like I said, monism, transcendentalism, right? You know, like I said, his pantheism, monism, where everything, he kind of did it in a communal way. He didn't talk like Hinduism and Buddhism. He didn't talk about everything being made of the same substance, but he just kind of talked about how we're all beings in this world together, and we all are human beings. Basically, our humanity is what is the kind of monism he kind of, our experiences and stuff, and the fact that he emphasized the working class and our jobs and stuff. You know, he sees himself like in every worker and every worker in himself. You know what I'm saying? Even though he was a writer, he still saw it as a job, as a profession, just like other people had jobs and professions in the factories and stuff. He saw every job, even the janitor, as important and stuff, and we all contribute in that way, you know, to society and to civilization. He also did see God and everything in God and stuff. It was kind of different. It wasn't straight Hinduism, Buddhism. He saw the way God acted in the Bible the same way humans acted like, and humans tried to be perfect like God, and God, you saw flaws in him being a jealous God and stuff like that. So that's kind of what he talks about, and basically talks about everything's connected. People, God, animals, plants, insects, all are basically in union and stuff. So that's how he connects things and stuff. The West, he talks a lot about the frontier. A lot about the frontier. He sees the West as basically opportunity. And basically, the main opportunity is self-realization. Basically, by leaving the settled East with its paved roads and stuff and going out to the western frontier, and basically settling and clearing the pioneer. It was a land basically for for Americans to go out to and settle, clear the land, and then they could move on up in the world and stuff and be their own boss on their own farm. Then he also talked about how Americans can reinvent themselves, their whole identity, by going west, where no one knew them. You know what I'm saying? They can start all over with a clean slate. They can become a tabula rasa. So basically, new opportunities to reinvent yourself. You can change your name, change your profession. You can go out there and get land where you couldn't get in the cities of the East. You can go out there and get land and become your own boss instead of working in the factory. And then also talks about American Adam. This is something that R.W.B. Lewis, he had a book, American Adam. He was also influential on Ralph Ellison and other writers. I want to read that book, probably go up into it, but it talks about here, you can see that this is where R.W.B. Lewis got the idea of the American Adam, because he talks about Adam in here a lot. He uses Adam all over the place in his poems, from his earliest to his latest. He places himself as the primeval American, the first American, and that's what Whitman symbolizes, as himself. He puts himself as that, the first American. Basically America at the time that he was publishing and stuff, because he got his newspaper job like around 1840, 1841. He was only like 21, 22 years old. And bulk of his writing, newspaper stuff, 1840s, like I said, he wrote his novel and stuff. And that, 1840s, 1860s, when he was initially writing, that was a transition time in America. Things were industrializing. We were just coming off the literary American Renaissance with the Transcendentalists. You know what I'm saying? They were still active. They had just begun in the late 1820s, going into the 1830s and stuff. And America was just reinventing itself. It was trying to find itself in its literature. It was trying to find itself in its themes. It was trying to settle the West. Everything was industrializing, mechanizing and stuff. So America was really trying to find itself. So that's where it comes to the American Adam and the West. You know what I'm saying? His solution was like for individual Americans to basically take advantage of the blank slate. That was the West and America. You know what I'm saying? And make themselves as individuals and stuff. Even though he talked about our commonalities, our common humanity and stuff, he was like, hey, even though we do have all this in common, we're all individuals, and you need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Rugged individuals. And he promoted hustle culture. You know what I'm saying? Today we call that rise and grind and stuff. But he was talking about that way back then and stuff. All right, basically going back to his lists and catalogs. He did this a lot. I ain't gonna lie. It was so synonymous. He would just repeat the same thing over, but use a different word, That could be boring and stuff, but other people have also used that method, and I would say he was the best at it. I don't like that method, but he was the best at it. You know what I'm saying? I have to give it up to him. He had a tendency to list things out endlessly. I mean, just like I said, he would use synonyms for the same thing, or go super into detail on this stuff, just deeper into detail. Like a lot of times he'll list the professions. Then he'll list out tools of that profession. Then he'll list out the products of that profession that they produce. You know what I'm saying? Like he'll talk about shipbuilders and all the tools that they use, and then the ships and all the parts of the ships that were produced and different types of ships and stuff. And then he would repeat that process with it. He would talk about bakers, right? Then he would talk about carpenters. Then he would talk about rug makers and stuff, and nurses, and yeah, he was just endless with these lists and catalogs with these different professions. He just did it over and over and over again, and I see how he was trying to connect people up. Kind of boring. I thought he should have just kind of chose out certain, chose 3 or 4 professions and stuck with it, but he just went on and on and on. So that would kind of make his stuff hard to get through. He would also do the same thing with landscapes, natural and the city. Like he would go into like the tree roots, the tree trunk, the tree bark, the tree branches, and the tree leaves and stuff. He would do that with birch trees, oak trees, sycamores, blah 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 blah. And then we'd do the same thing with the cities. He would talk about the streets. Then we talk about the pavement and the curbs and the sidewalk. Then we talk about the houses, the roofs and the beams and the walls and the windows. Then he would talk about the different wagons and stuff, the boats, the ferries, He would just break it down to the very last compound and go into detail and stuff. To show the commonality, to show how, hey, nature is structures, and so is our artificial technology that we created, and we were kind of imitating nature and stuff. So that's how he connected up stuff, just breaking it down and showing you, comparing them. Hey, this is made of stuff and structures, and it's created, and our technology, it's kind of like biomimicry. Our technology imitated nature and stuff, but we just perfected it. And stuff. And so the same thing with city landscapes. I believe his method of doing this is basically to include everyone and everything in order to connect everything. That's his way of connection, by listing out and explaining it and stuff. Like I said, he should have chose some things and just stuck with it, but he does this with everything. It's just exhaustive. It is encyclopedic. It is panoramic. It can be a trudge to get through, but hey, you get through it and you see exactly what he's talking about. This is kind of like I said, going his form of monism, or pantheology of his transcendentalism. He transcends categorization to show how we are all the same. So hey, that's A-okay. Going into, let's get into it. His homosexuality. All right. I understand why he was coy about it, because back then in the 1800s that was not cool. So I don't really blame him. Like his Live Oak with Moss, I see why he suppressed it, and when only found it out, I believe Live Oak and Moss was published like around 1990s, so about a century after his death. It just wasn't cool back then, but he does talk about it, he does hint about it, and you can see it in his poems. So it's cool with me, but I can understand why he would hide it. Nowadays, he would be like, oh, bring that out, but back then, he just couldn't say, so I don't really blame him for hiding it. You know what I'm saying? It's not on display, very much in this particular collection. I don't really think he used too much of the Calamus section of the deathbed edition of, I believe it was Grass, but it's really not on full display. It is here and there in that particular collection. Haven't really read, like I said, the deathbed with Calamus. One day I'll read that and see, but it's not really here on display. It's hinted at and it's very ambiguous. You can read a line and see, like, oh, wait a minute, hold up. But you might accidentally look at it and think he's talking about with a woman, but then again, it's like, because like he'll use like the word, he emphasizes like brotherhood, fraternity, with a slight hint that it's a metaphor for romance. Because at first you hear brotherhood and da-da-da, you think he's talking about comradeship, friendship with other men. But the way he says it, the way he says brotherhood and fraternity, it's a very slight, subtle hint that, yeah, he's talking about friendship, just platonic friendship, but you can see, once you read it again, oh, he's hinting at romance and man-on-man love and sex. So he doesn't come out with it, but I believe that's his way of hiding it by talking about brotherhood and fraternity. You know, like I said, yeah, you know, Calamus, like I said, there's 1 or 2 poems up in here, then other non-Calamus poems up in there. He hints at it, but he doesn't really come out and say it. You know, like I said, I've done a review on Live Oak and Moss, and he just comes out and just says it right there. You know what I'm saying? I've already done a thing on that. I don't really think I have to emphasize it. But I do have to say, you know, he probably would have been a daredevil if he had come out with Live Oak and Moss when he did, because he actually, Live Oak and Moss, those poems were finished because Live Oak and Moss, that was a trip that he took to New Orleans in like 1846. So he was still young. He was still in his 20s. And he basically finished those around the early 1850s, so he could have published it. But yeah, he would have been, he probably would have been banned and stuff. But hey, I like it, you know, and you really see how the humanity of romance and the troubles he had and trying to scope out people and stuff, you know. I already did a thing on that. I probably should have reread it to compare and stuff, but yeah, that's another thing. I really have to say, you know, there is some poems that stuck out to me. I know a lot of people like to talk about Song of Myself. That's his most famous one. That was in here and stuff, and they also had like a there was also a pre-version of it, a notebook fragments of Song of Myself. It's up in here. I read the fragments, and then I read, like, here it is, early notebook fragment Song of Myself, and then here is the poem itself. That's the one he's more known of, because he kind of like goes into himself, but then connects himself up to other people and stuff. And it's a good poem. I wouldn't say it was stellar and stuff. You know, after reading it, people see it as a anthem to rebellion. I kind of don't really see that. I really can't say I agree with that labeling of it. I really feel that he was kind of struggling to, you know, he was connecting up with people, but you could tell also at the same time he was trying to hint at his homosexuality also. You know, out of all the poems and stuff, that's the one that had the most hints, his brotherhood and his fraternity hints and stuff. I think if he just came out and said it, it would have been a better poem. And then also a lot of his, basically, if you had to read one thing that encapsulates his style of poetry, it'd be Song of Myself. He uses a lot of his city and technology metaphors. He uses a lot of his nature metaphors. He does talk about his homosexuality, but hinted at. He talks about his monism and transcendentalism in there. So if you don't have time to read the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass and stuff, there are books, standalone books of Song of Myself. If you read that, you've read the rest of his poems and stuff. So I really can't say that I found it really that entertaining. So I'm sorry, that's just me. But there are some poems that stood out in the book, like Scented Herbage of My Breast. Okay. You know, he used the appearance of leaves as a metaphor for being a closeted homosexual. Yeah, that's another thing that he used, you know, when he wasn't using brotherhood or fraternity. And the way he does it, like, when he says like throwing away of leaves, right, to bare his naked breast, is basically him coming out the closet. You know, because you throw away, like you take your clothes and blah blah blah, and you see your chest, boom, that's him coming out the closet. You know, and being openly gay. You know, but of course he didn't really say it. He used metaphors of the leaves. You know, and even though he doesn't openly say it, he is strongly hinting at his refusal to hide his homosexuality. So I really think that with this poem, it kind of, he was kind of like a fence sitter, or like he had one foot in the closet, but he was right at that threshold, hovering above the threshold, where he had another foot outside the closet. So he was strongly hinting at his homosexuality, but he didn't come out and say it. And this is, you know, Scented Herbage in Breast, and My Breast is kind of one of his rare poems when he comes out. Well, he doesn't come out, but he hints at it so strongly, you have to be a dumbass not to see it. There's another one I saw in Louisiana, Live Oak Growing. Now this is basically, you know, a poem from Live Oak and White Moss in his series of his lost poems about his homosexual love life. This is like his last line, stating that the oak he saw in Louisiana stands alone, but him as a homosexual cannot. Okay, this is declaration. This is another declaration that he will live his homosexual life. Yes, basically, like I talked a little bit earlier, you know, he used oaks as basically standalone. As a homosexual back then, he could not be out, so he had to be kind of stealth and stuff. But it's really frustrating. You could feel it in this. I saw, you know, in Louisiana, Live Oak Growing. That's him. You know, hey, he's homosexual. He feels it. It burns inside of him, but he knows that he can't come out, otherwise he would get persecuted and stuff. But he kind of, in this version of it, you know, which was not the same version in Live Oak and Moss. If I can remember correctly, it was different. You know, but he is basically hinting at that, you know, he just can't do it. He just doesn't want to do it. And he struggles with that, you know. It's like he wants to go along, but he knows he can't, because if he does that, his life will be destroyed. So he has to really strongly hint at it. And this version is, like I said, very different than what's in the lost poem. So yeah, you know, that's something that's really kind of frustrating, you know, reading his thing, because you could feel his frustration, and you wish that back then he could have came out and just said, hey, I'm homosexual, and he could have been happy like people are nowadays from that community, but he just couldn't. You know, Christianity ruled the day, and it was very much more conservative, and, you know, Christianity was illegal back then. It was considered a mentally health problem. So if he would have came out, he would have been totally destroyed. So yeah, you know, I feel his frustration. He probably would have been more happier. You can sense that. But hey, time was back then. Okay, let me kind of summarize what's going on. You know, regardless whether Whitman uses metaphors from nature, work, or the city landscape, Whitman has placed himself as the spokesperson for the American people. By speaking in a universal language, he forms a community by showing there is no division. Okay? The division people see is illusory. Therefore, everyone is the same. He has placed himself as the great wise man, right, who sees the light and leads the way. Yeah. So yes, like I said, you know, he basically uses, you know, the monism to say that, hey, we're all the same, we're all human, you know, and basically I am, you know, the great bard and interpreter, and I'm shining light on our common humanity and stuff as Americans and stuff, and I'm showing how we can all, you know, reinvent ourselves and transcend regular mundane life and stuff. So that kind of sounds like I said, like the book, Whitman in Light of Vedanta, kind of talks about that. How he co-opted, how him and other transcendentalists like Emerson and Walt and Thoreau use that metaphor, and we kind of get that today. People say, hey, you can, rise and grind, and culture, you can reinvent yourself. The immigrant experience, come to America, come all ye your huddled masses and come to America and achieve something. And basically all of that stuff he's talking about in his poems and stuff. And he says that he's the grand priest. You know what I'm saying? He's the Yoda of the American heart and experience and stuff. I have to say, he's not the only person who's done that. A lot of other authors have done that too. A lot of other artists have done that too. He wasn't exactly the first one. You could find people trying to do that in the 1700s, even in the 1600s with the Pilgrims. You have people writing that stuff. Even before him, the Transcendentalists with Emerson and Thoreau and all the rest of them, they were trying to do it. He wasn't exactly with them and stuff. He was in connection with them. He did hang out with them and meet some of them, had correspondence and letters with them and stuff. I think that was his... I'd have to say that was his PR. That was his public relations. That was his public persona. Does he do a good job? Honestly, we're basically about over 100 years after his death, and other people have done the same thing, have tried to do the same. Politicians do that every election cycle. Other artists have done that. Immigrants, people who are not here from America who come in, do that. Different subgroups within America, whether it's racial, whether it's regional, whether it's different denominations have done that, have declared that. That's kind of like the idea of America. I think he does an okay job. Like I said, he's not the best poet. He's a good poet, but I wouldn't say he's the best poet in America or the world. Sometimes it was hard to get through. Like I said, he can basically restate the same thing synonymously again and again and again. He will go into extra detail that I don't think that you need to go in depth to explain, to show the connections that are common humanity and also our connections to nature, okay, and technology, how it relates to us, and the comparison between technology and nature, the comparison between God and us. He kind of, even in the same poem, he kind of does the same thing. But every artist does repeat the same themes and stuff. You know what I'm saying? I kind of think that he's kind of, I really say, I don't know. I have to say he was good, but I would say kind of in between, like lower above average and upper middle and stuff. From all the literature I've read. But people can read him and learn from him and take his themes and stuff and reinvent them their own way. Just like he was doing the exact same thing. He was not new. Like I said, he took a lot from he was with the Transcendentalists. He wasn't a formal member, but like I said, he did meet up with him. He did correspond with him. He did interact with him. But yeah, you can say he's the bard, but I think he's one of many bards. I think he is a bard, one of many American bards, but I don't think that he is the bard. You know what I'm saying? But I don't think that should stop people from reading his stuff. Like I said, it can be intimidating to read the omnibus Deathbed Leaves of Grass edition, and you're not getting all of his stuff when you read the original Leaves of Grass. You probably should get collections like this of like 200 something pages and stuff. You know, like this series. This is the American Poets Project series. There's other books in this series of other poems, like Carl Sandburg I really want to read, and William Carlos Williams and Henry Rockroth and other poems and poets. Yeah, you know, that I'm probably going to be reading a lot of books in this series. I believe there's like 30 books in this series, American Poets Project, that go over their whole life. You know, so you won't have to read omnibus editions like the Deathbed edition. I would say probably it's the best way to, you'd probably give up if you read the Deathbed edition, which is like 700 pages long. But if you get a collection like this of like 200 pages, where you get the gist of his stuff overall and stuff, because he did come out with separate booklets. Like he came out with drum rivulets, and a whole bunch of other different poetry collections. I can't really remember them like that. I remember drum rivulets and other stuff. Democratic Vistas, da 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 da. Oh no, I'm sorry. That is a collection of essays. I'm sorry, but yeah, he did come out with separate poetic books. Then when he was older, as each different. See, what he did was kind of unique. He would come out with a different separate book of poems, and then when he had an updated version of Leaves of Grass, he would just combine it in. So as he went along in life, he would come up with these individual things, but then when another edition of Leaves of Grass, he would just combine it till at the end of his life, they were just all combined. But there are some books you can get a copy of his individual poetry collections as he came along, and you can do it like that. It's up to you, you know. If you have the stamina to read his stuff in the omnibus, Deathbed, Leaves of Grass, if you want to read the individual collections of poems, or you want to read that, I would say, because it's kind of hard to read, and his lists make it hard to read, can be dense with the symbolism, I'd say probably get this. But he's worth reading if you're probably a foreigner and you want to know an American can-do spirit. It's illustrated the best up in there. So yeah, okay, well that's about it. I've talked long enough. Like I said, I wanted to read his stuff, and I finally got to it. I had to read another book and that stuff in order to interpret it. That really helped me and stuff, and I think overall it really is great, because you can get a sense of America from reading him. So yes, I recommend it, but I recommend it reading in small doses, like a greatest hits volume and stuff. That'll be more accessible and stuff, because it can get repetitive. So yeah, I recommend him, and yeah, that's about it. And I'll get to another book review. All right, later.